What's up, everybody? We have the meta snapshot for patch 13.7 and a lot of changes because so far this set there's always been one dominant comp and there's a new one this week, and then there's also like a new OP augment that we need to talk about. So onto the summary. In the S tier we have Infiniteam, that's like the new perma spam comp. Time Knife Shen, this is the broken augment that I was talking about. Leblanc Hacker, Lucian Reroll, Kaisa Reroll round out the S tier, and there are quite a few options. But these two top comps, plus maybe LeBlanc, are just like the most dominant right now. But that doesn't mean there aren't any more options. In the A tier, we have Anima, Misfortune, and Spellslinger. These two took a back seat this week, but they're still very playable. I talked about it in my patch preview, how they didn't kill these comps. Normally when they nerf stuff, they kind of kill them, but that didn't happen. They're still playable. Jhin is another option at 4 cost. Duelists as like a tempo comp. Jax, if you get a good game for it. Lasercorps, still decent, but Lasercorps did take a pretty big hit compared to before. Threats, and then Gnar Reroll. And then in the B tier, we have Vex, Jinx, Draven, Hearts, and Samira. So that's going to round out part of the summary this week. And if you want like sub rankings, like what's S+, what's S-, head on over to one of these two links over here on the website. They show the same information, so you just need to subscribe to one of them if you care about that. But you don't really need to in a lot of cases. On to how to play all the comps. So Infiniteam, you pretty much just want 7 Infiniteam. That's going to always be the highest cap. And put Shen and Ezreal wherever the squares are for the Infiniteam duplicator. So if so in the front line, you generally want to put your Shen there. In the back line, you generally want to put the Ezreal there. Sometimes you get 2 in the front. Sometimes you get 2 in the back. You could just put like Shen plus like whoever's holding your Infinity Spatula. Most of the time it's Garen, or just put Pantheon there to duplicate. If it's both backline, then do something like Twisted Fate plus Ezreal. That's going to be pretty good. With the Samira buffs, she's actually really good as like a temporary carry before you get to Ezreal. So you could use Sivir as an item holder in the early game, Samira later on, and then in the super late game use Ezreal. That's kind of how it works here. The comp is around like A tier if you don't have Infinity Spatula. But if you do have it, then it turns into like S+ very, very easily. But this is by far the strongest comp right now because it was already playable last patch and they buffed it for some reason. I always wondered why, but that's what happened. If you guys want more details on the comp, you can just like go over to the website, BunnyMuffins.lol, click the picture. It takes you to the team builder with like everything if you want to like adjust it. Maybe you want to like change up some of the items if you like something else. If you want to change up some of the placements of the champions, maybe some of the items or like what have you. There's always different stuff you could do to kind of like play around with different builds. So pretty interesting to do. If you make guides yourself, I think this is a great tool for that too, because you could like add comp names, save it, and just pretty much do whatever with it. But you could also find that on teamfight.lol. Lots of new features are going to be added next week, so do look out for that. But onto the how to play this comp. This is just like typical TFT, so nothing weird you have to do here. You kind of want to stabilize if you need to on level 6, stabilize if you need to on level 7, or just go fast 8. All 3 options work. It depends on your life total, depends on how many pairs you have on your bench. Sometimes people ask me like, when do I roll on 3-5 at level 7? When do I roll on 4-1 at level 7? When do I roll at level 6? And there's no like set in stone answer because each game is going to be different. But typically if you have a lot of pairs or if you're really low health, that's typically when you want to roll a little bit earlier than you want to. But obviously, fast 8ing is probably going to be ideal for this comp because you want to find the higher cost units. You need to find Twisted Fate to get to 5 Infiniteam a lot of times. And then if you do get a Spatula, you definitely want Ezreal to get 7 because it's just so strong. But yeah, essentially Sureshots got buffed a bunch. So this comp got a lot more powerful because 1, you could use Samira as a temporary item holder before you get to Ezreal. And once you get Ezreal, he just gets stronger as well. So really powerful. For Infiniteam emblem, definitely Garen's probably the best user, and especially if it's frontline, just duplicate him. But if not, you could also use legendaries that we list out here. And we do have like some other item recommendations down here as well, along with like augments if you want more details on augments, or any of the hero augments. Pretty much the augments are good just because you get a copy of the champion. They're not good necessarily because of their effects. It's mainly just because you get an extra copy of the champion. Because when you really need Ezreal and you get the augment for it, it unlocks the comp like 10 times. But let's move on into the next build. We have Time Knife Shen. Wow, what a build. It only works with Time Knife augment, but if you get it, it's pretty much just like auto top 2 oftentimes. You just build him like you would Jax, but it's a little weird because you go like for Protector's Vow, but you also want like the RFC The Quicksilver is pretty nice. And then you just run as many Shens as you can. I've seen some people, they run 3 Shens because it really is just that powerful. Voidson wrote this down here, and he does most of the meta reads. And it says here, it might be an immediate pivot as long as your items are like somewhat relevant. So if you can build like any sort of attack speed, sort of hybrid tanky build, like just go for the Shen because it's just completely nonsense broken right now. But yeah, requirements is armor for Shen, and that's going to be through the 6 defenders that you see here. And if you can get extra range such as RFC or scope weapons, but it's not absolutely necessary, but it definitely helps a lot. Kind of same with Jax, but maybe not as reliant. But in the how to play section down here, if you have heavy defender start or at least 1 bow, you can consider this comp. But again, the only way to play it is through 3-cost hero augments, so you can't just force this build every game. But if you do get it, it's just like one of those broken augment comps that kind of typically happen like throughout the set ever since they introduced hero augments. Then if you don't hit the comp, you have to pivot to something else, but you do have defender still most of the time, so you could do like defender sure shot or even something goofy if you have like the means to do so. It's even listed down here. Another way to play it is 4 defender with 4 Shens, 2 of them being 2-star, 2 of them being 1-star. And again, like it's not a joke, it's like just try it and you'll see how stupid this is. There are some other item recommendations down here, such as like Bramble Vest, Spear of Shojin, and then you just put generic tank items on everyone else. But again, only do this if you get the Time Knife augment because it just doesn't work without it. On to the next build, we have the Leblanc Hacker build. So couple of ways to do this, but you really rely on like Leblanc 3, Pike 3, and then Blitzcrank's going to be a key component as one of your main tanks. So you could put Blitzcrank on like no further than like the 2nd row, because you want their units to walk up a bit so LeBlanc doesn't target any tanks. But if you do get a lot of tank items, just throw them on your Blitzcrank. You could also do Pike, either or kind of works. But you also need to make sure you have like some semi-relevant admin trait for LeBlanc. She doesn't really need Spellslinger, believe it or not, so this build is better than like the 6 Spellslinger builds. But you pretty much just hacker your LeBlanc in and you don't really care about anything else that happens in this game. Look to stabilize on stage 3 too, so you will have to roll on level 6 a bit. Find at least 1 LeBlanc. If you have a LeBlanc pair on 3-2, definitely roll to get her to 2-star. And if you are able to get Hacker, that's kind of how you know you're stable. But other options is like LeBlanc plus 4 Brawler or just any frontline. And as per usual, just mix and match any usable synergies on that stage. You don't need to get like an exact level 6 board because that's going to be a lot of wasted gold. You just need to put yourself in a position to get to level 7 pretty safely, be able to slow roll at level 50 because be able to slow roll, go down to 50 gold every single round. Just because she's a 3-cost unit, level 7 is the most optimal time to roll for her. And there's also a list of what the best admins are down here. Pretty much anything that gives AP or permanent health are going to be really good. And if you don't have blue buff, you could get like some mana augment instead, and that's going to help you a ton. So you have a couple of different options there. Here are her list of items down here. Blue buff, Jeweled Gauntlet, Hextech Gunblade. I'd say these are probably the preferred. Rabadon's Death Cap is good because again, you're not running Spellslinger, so she doesn't have as much AP as she normally would. Guardbreaker, just good item. Same with Giant Slayer, just pretty flexible. And then there's also Spear of Shojin. Blue buff is a little better than Spear of Shojin, but like don't sweat it too much if you have to build a Shojin. But yeah, again, one reminder, don't like frontline your tanks because you want the enemy team to walk up a lot so that LeBlanc doesn't target one of the tanks early on. Some other good augments that we have up here is like, obviously the LeBlanc carry one's going to be preferred, but a golden ticket or like think fast, anything that can help you hit your team is going to be really, really, really nice. Any on-kill effects, because LeBlanc is like single target, is going to be strong, such as like Axiom Mark, Thrill of the Hunt, going to be really good. But there's like a full list down here if you all want to check that out in your free time. Next up, let's talk about Lucian Reroll. So Quick Draw got a big buff. So I see a lot of people playing a lot of Quick Draw. You may notice there are only 5 champions here, so as you level up, you just add in more Quick Draw. I believe we go over that down here. Like you could just kind of just have this core and then add whatever. But Lucian is good with both Renegade and Quick Draw, and it's great to reroll because there are a couple 1-cost units you can kind of just spam. You have the Silas for Renegade, Camille for Renegade, and then Blitzcrank for Admin. So Admin, obviously, you probably want like some sort of team-wide buff, but if you don't get that, that's fine too. Blitzcrank is just really tanky right now, so that's why people play him a lot. So you want either the Lucian augment, his support one's the best one, believe it or not. It's better than the carry one. And then the other one is Blitzcrank's carry augment, which gives him dynamic defenses, which gets you the Gargoyle Stone Plate. But yeah, it's weird that the support Lucian augment is a little bit better, but it just is, just because it's based on how many times you cast, you get more AP or something like that. But you can always check the details by clicking on the link here, and then you can hover over whatever you want, and it gives the tooltip that shows you. But yeah, when you field Lucian, your team gains 20 ability power and then 2 more whenever they attack, and this can stack. So you just get like so much AP for your entire team whenever you play this. And obviously because Lucian's AP base and he's not like a Spellslinger which gives AP, he's not Anima squad that gives AP, it's pretty much giving him like a Rabadon's death cap, which is really good because both Quick Draw and Renegade are both damage multipliers. So you just boost up the base stats, you get multiplied a bit more, you know? Whereas traits with big base stats such as Spellslingers, you want to multiply it with stuff like Jeweled Gauntlet, Giant Slayer, Guard Breaker, things like that. That's why Talia makes such good use of those items, but we'll talk more about Talia a little bit later. But yeah, this is a 1-cost reroll comp, so you just want to econ lose streak early, preferably. If you win streak or like go win lose in stage 2, it's not the end of the world, you just will have less money. But ideally you go for this comp when you have a lot of Lucians. And very important, roll at level 4 on stage 3-1 until 30 gold. Just to get more copies of Lucian, Blitzcrank, and Sylas, because on stage 3-1, that's the last stage you'll be level 4 on, and level 4 just has much higher odds than level 5, so this is the preferred way to play 1-cost reroll, whereas before, we kind of did slow rolling at level 5 the whole time. That was kind of like a method that people used in previous sets, but ever since like set 8, I think this got a lot more popular, this style of rolling down to 30, and it's really important to do because it's just works out a lot better for most people. For Lucian items, you just want mana items and then just generic AP after that. So just blue buff or Shojin and then any sort of damage item after that will work. Tank items are pretty good. And then like when you do add in a misfortune later, just any generic misfortune items will work great on her. But yeah, here are some other augment recommendations as well as the ones on the picture up here. So I'll let you guys browse that in your own time. Next up, we have Kaisa Reroll. So Kaisa is finally back on the block. She's either the worst champion or the best champion, and right now she's really, really good. Because again, quick draw is really good. So this is a 3 quick draw build. Some people go 4. It really just depends if you like can afford to or not. Sometimes if you get like a trait augment, you can kind of fit it. Sometimes if you're just not hitting your front line, you can play the Lucian for 4 quick draw. But this is kind of what it looks like. 4 Star Guardian, 3 quick draw, and then some random defensive traits up here. And it's kind of like a duo carry between Kaisa and Misfortune. And what's great about this is that there are a lot of things you can 3-star. So you're focused on the 3 costs most importantly. So Kaisa, Nyla, and Riven are really good. But Rel's also a pretty decent tank. And she's a 2 cost. You generally hit her pretty much around the same time as you do your Kaisa. But yeah, Kaisa, huge buff. So that's why you need to play her. And it's very similar to Kaisa from last set. You stabilize a bit on 3-2 by rolling a bit, find at least 1 Kaisa, preferably a 2-star Kaisa, because I wouldn't force this comp unless I already had 1 Kaisa from beforehand. And then you pair it with the 2-star frontline. It doesn't have to be Rel. Sometimes you randomly hit Nyla before Rel. Sometimes you randomly hit Riven 2 before Rel. So you kind of have to play around with that. But then after that, you go level 7 around stage 4-1, 4-2. And then you just slow roll, maintaining about 50 gold every single time. And then just make sure you follow the core units that we have listed up there. There's also the core listed down here, but it's just 4 Star Guardian and Quick Draw. If you do get Rel's Hold the Line augment, you could 3-star Rel first by slow rolling at level 6 and then level up to level 7 later. But typically you're going to do the level 7 slow roll strategy. I just realized a lot of the top comps right now are kind of like reroll comps, so like Golden Ticket and Think Fast. One other note on the Shen comp before we get too far ahead of ourselves. Some people might ask, is getting Shen 3-star better than 4 Shens or 3 Shens? And the answer is no. Do not 3-star your Shen, just play multiple Shens instead. It's just going to do more damage because he's just that good right now. You guys can check the data if you want, but yeah, 2 2-star Shens outperforms a 3-star Shen, believe it or not. And playing like 3 or 4 Shens does even better. It's actually kind of crazy. So again, do not 3-star your Shen. But let's move on into the next comp, Gnar Hacker. So Gnar is pretty good right now, and it's because of like 5 Gadget Team, and he just really interacts well with the Hacker trait because he does a massive AoE, and when he's in the back, he just one-taps the backline. It's hard for him to kill frontliners. It takes him like 2, maybe 3 casts, but in the backline, he just boop, bops them, and it's like good game after that. So Gnar 3-star definitely viable. It's also good with Pyke 3-star. Pyke's just general good unit. The only weird thing about Pyke this set is that his traits are kind of weird because they're not really usable in the early game. So Pyke isn't really that great till later on. But Pike 3 is actually pretty solid right now. But the way you play this is the same as like the Leblanc build where you did 3-cost reroll, or the Kaisa build. You stabilize at 3-2 at level 6 first, and then you slow roll at level 7 after that and roll down until he's 3-star. And sometimes you have to figure out when to all in. Sometimes I do that when I have 6 copies of Gnar, sometimes I do it when I have like 7. Depends on what your HP is and how many 3-costs are out of the pool. So if you see other people rerolling Kaisas, other people re-rolling LeBlanc, there's a higher chance you could hit your Gnar, so you can kind of all in earlier if your enemies get 3-star or whatever before you. The one annoying thing about this comp is that you have to scout a lot because you want to hacker your Gnar into the enemy carries. And I mean, it's pretty straightforward because it's like obvious to do, but just make sure you give yourself like 5 seconds at the end of each round just to scout and make sure your Gnar hits something good. Another useful thing to have is Gadgettine +1 from Gadgettine Soul, Gadgettine Crest, or Gadgettine Heart, or like from Atoma Traits, because it just allows you to get to 5 Gadgettine without relying on hitting Nunu, because Nunu is very hard to hit. Here are some Gnar item recommendations. Titan Resolve is probably his best item, and then some Lifesteal is nice because he's kind of in the back line. I know you get healing from Hacker sometimes, but oftentimes it's just better to just have a real healing item on him because he really does need it. Last Whisper is good if you need to kill tanks, but like any of the other stuff works, just generic damage items, Deathblade, Infinity Edge, things like that. Pike can just take anything and then you just like get utility items or tank items on everyone else. You could do like Poppy Tank if you have Gadgettine, or like do Nunu items if you get like a big Nunu for some random reason. For hero augments, Gnar's hero augments are both good. Support one's slightly better. Shen's works as well, so you don't need like your Gnar augment. A lot of other reroll comps, they need like their specific augments, such as like the Lucian one, such as the Shen Time Knife one, but Gnar can kind of just work well on his own. And you could even use like Nunu's augment because it helps you get to 5 Gadgettine if it pops up. But let's move on into the A tier because these are still playable. A lot of the S tier this week, they're situational. So it's like Infiniteam, that's probably the only one you could just spam and like play it every game. No one's gonna care. Time Knife Shen, you need the augment. Hacker LeBlanc, you need like lots of copies of LeBlanc. Lucian, another reroll comp. Kaisa, another reroll comp. Gnar, another reroll comp. So they're a little bit more situational. It's kind of like you have to get a good start for them. But starting in the A tier, we're back to like the 4-cost carry with like Misfortune, Spellslingers with Twist of Fate, and Jhin. So there is still like regular gameplay. It's just a little weaker right now than some of those reroll comps. But like Infiniteam's still a thing that plays pretty standardly. But nothing's really changed on Anima apart from like some nerfs to Misfortune, so that's why it's a little lower this week. It's definitely still playable, and you do need like a decent start for it. Like some people like getting stacks on Anima early on, and they like refuse to play it otherwise. But if you ever get like Anima Spatula with like a couple copies of the units, if you ever get like a Spatula off Carousel and like it's a potential thing to go into, I definitely do recommend playing Anima Squad, especially if you're going down the ability power tree. If you're like flexing between the MF comp and the Spellslinger comp, you're going for like tiers, rods, things like that. It's definitely like an option you need to keep open. Onto the next comp, we have Oxforce Spellslingers. We talked about this a lot last week, but it got nerfed pretty decently and other stuff got buffed, so that's why it dropped down a little bit too. It's definitely still playable though. I played this comp a bunch since the patch came out. I think I did fine on them. Nothing like spectacular, but like it definitely is still good, and you just can't like blindly force it every single game now. You need like a half decent start. You don't need a perfect start to go into it, but you need like a half decent start and you'll be doing fine. But I won't talk about this comp too much because we played this all of last week. So if you don't know how to play this comp yet, just watch like last week's video talking about it because it goes a lot more in depth there. But Jhin Renegades is up next. Jin's kind of in a weird spot because AD is so weird because Samira, like she works in the Infiniteam comp, but you really want Ezreal. Jhin works really oddly because he's a Riftwalker, and Riftwalkers just like acts really strange in my opinion. It's not like you're holding on to Pike and Vex in the mid game because you're playing Jhin, because they don't really complement each other at all. But essentially what you want to do is play 5 Renegade. This actually is 5 Renegade, not 4, because the Zac you just put next to your Jhin. I need to update this image. I forgot to this week. But It's a little bit of a high roll comp because you do need to hit very specific things such as the Leona. You need good Jhin and Viego items. So it's not quite like S tier as the other comps. It's not even like that high on the A tier. I mean, it is high on the A tier, but relative to like the other 4 costs, like Jhin definitely is like a step below because he does require a bit more. But you pretty much just like, as we were talking about before, you kind of flex into this comp. You don't go into a game thinking you're going to play Jhin, because you don't typically hold on to Vex and Pyke when you have like a lot of AD items. But we go into how to play the early game here. Draven's a good item holder. There are other ones up here like Jax, Ashe, Camille can also work, because they all use the same generic like AD items, or they could at least hold them temporarily while you're waiting for your team to kind of like shape up. But Renegade Crown, obviously really good. High-end shopping, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there are like 2 legendaries in the comp. You could play even more legendaries in this and like drop some other stuff instead. That's all definitely very viable, but the comp just really revolves around like fast aiding and then hitting your 4-cost 2 stars, which is pretty difficult because there really aren't that many cheap units in this team. It's only Alistar, Vex, Pyke, and Camille, but all these champions don't really help you win. So if you have them upgraded or not, it pretty much doesn't change the outcome. You're really just relying around your Jhin 2 and your Viego 2 and like 1 random tank. Next build up we have is Duelists. Only play this if you get a strong start, because it's just not worth playing otherwise, because it's like kind of like a top 4 comp. So you really need to have high HP to kind of like slowly bleed out. So what do I mean by strong start? If you have either 4 Duelists or a Locket on stage 2-1 when the game starts, that's pretty much like the only scenario when I play this. Preferably I meet both of those conditions, having a Locket and 4 Duelists on stage 2-1. Or if you get like some insane Duelist augment like Phony Frontline, Duelist Crest, things of that nature, those would kind of be like the only times I would play this build. It just really has a low cap. I'm not saying it's impossible to win with it. Like I've won with it recently. I think I played it like maybe 4 times this set and I won once, and that's pretty good, right? If you look at that small sample size, but I'm not saying it can never win, but it's just really hard to. But you just stack Lockets on Nyla. I like having at least 2 of them. Third one might be a little overkill, but 2 Lockets on Nyla, very good. And then you itemize either Vayne or Twisted Fate. If you can get a 3-star Vayne, focus on Vayne. If not, focus on Twisted Fate. But just slam items as fast as possible. Like, you might look at these items up here and be like, oh, like I could build Runons, I could build this, I could build that, I could build the Shiv, Hat, GS on Twisted Fate. It doesn't matter. You're just slamming any buildable item on them because there's like a big list here. Like, no matter what stage of the game you're in, like you could probably build one of these if you have like 3 or 4 components. So just build the item and don't like feel bad about it, because since you're playing a comp that doesn't really win out that often, you just need to slam items for value early on to save HP. Next build up we have is Jax. Jax is like the classic 1 trait comp. You really just care about Brawler. But you could also run Warwick as your secondary carry. It all works. But just make sure you have extra range for your Jax. That's going to be either through a rapid fire cannon or a scope weapons augment. And just like any other reroll, like Golden Ticket, Think Fast, really important. Battle Mage is pretty good because he's already in the front, so you meet that condition really easily. And then any of the Brawler augments are going to be pretty good for you too. Pretty much the only unit you care about is Jax, but sometimes Warwick can do some work. But really just find perfect Jax items and maybe like 1 or 2 tank items. Redemption's probably best in slots. Sunfire Cape is extremely good because the fights last a long time. And then Ionic Spark is good if you're in a heavy MR lobby, because you do need some magic penetration shred for this team. But yeah, it's pretty much just 6 or 8 brawlers, same as last set. So it's just pretty easy to play. Next up we have Lasercorps. So Lasercorps definitely took a step down, even though it's got a little bit better in my opinion, because 4 Lasercorps is definitely more playable than before. The only weird part that happened, or reason why it's a bit lower, is because like some weird comps got buffed and that just kind of pushes it down a bit. The good news is that you're not as reliant on Mordekaiser as you were from last patch, so it is a bit more consistent. But I think it was an A tier last week before. Just keep in mind most of the power comes from the trait, so it's more important to get units rather than like getting perfect items if you can help it. So on Carousel, like if there's a Mordekaiser but he has like kind of bad items or whatever, you still take it just because you really want to get as many Lasercorps in as possible. But let's move on into the next build, which is Threats. Threats is pretty basic to play. You just play the threat units. You don't really have to think too much. Bel'Veth's going to be your primary carry, Acel secondary, but if you get like a good Acel augment, you could use him as a carry instead. Aatrox's augments are actually pretty decent if you haven't tried them out yet. He is actually a pretty solid tank. I don't think he's as tanky as Zac, but he also does more damage, so it's a little bit different in how they both work. But this is definitely like a backup comp. You don't go into a game saying like, oh, I'm going to play threats today or threats this game. You go into it when you're like, oh, let me build some AD items, let me build some AP items, depending on what you're going. And then if you randomly hit an Acel 2, randomly hit a Bel'Veth 2, because it happens all the time, because not many people go for them, you could just use them and play this comp temporarily. Like, of course, you could play this the whole game and probably do fine, but a lot of times you play this comp temporarily, wait to hit some legendaries, and then slowly replace your team into one of the other like top builds right now. So that's kind of one of the weird ways about playing this. It's either really easy or difficult depending on how you look at it, because if you just don't pivot and you just play the comp just because you like clicking threat units, like, yeah, it's going to be pretty easy to play. But if you are going to use this as like a temporary comp to transition into other stuff later on, definitely very strong there. That's going to round out the A tier. Onto the B tier. Vex took a bit of a hit, got nerfed quite a bit, so yeah, I wouldn't really play Vex unless you magically start the game with like a lot of Vexes, or you have like so much gold that like it doesn't matter, because Vex definitely took a backseat this patch, and it's kind of unfortunate. But you just slow roll at level 6 or level 7, depending if you go for supers or not. Some people play the supers, some people go for the Riftwalker version. Both are fine. It really just depends on what's happening in your game. So don't like look at this image and be like, oh my god, this guy thinks the Riftwalker version sucks. It's like both versions are fine. It's like you just have to change it depending on what's happening in your game. Also, it's in the B tier right now, so you shouldn't like pay that much attention to it and just like play whatever you get. It's not gonna like, the only time you go for this comp is when you have like some overwhelming advantage, such as like having a lot of copies of Vex for no reason, and pretty much nothing else really matters after that, because you just want Vex and like some sort of, and one person to tank. Hopefully it's going to be Malphite, and then you're pretty much set after that. Jinx Reroll, you just need the carry Jinx augment, and this is what the comp would look like. Next one up we have is Draven Reroll. Draven Reroll, yeah, he used to be good, but he got nerfed, so not as strong for sure. Like, even if you get his augments, I wouldn't like auto play him by any means. I'd only play him again if I have like so many Dravens that it doesn't matter that the comp's weaker than everything else, and you're gonna plow through them anyways, because like you're gonna get a free Draven 3. It's like hitting like a 2-star 4 cost for free. Hitting a Draven 3 for free is kind of like the same feeling. So you only kind of play it in those scenarios. Hearts Reroll, the Cleansing Safeguard augment, do not pick it. Do not even click it. It is so bad right now. I think it averages like a 5.5 placement, which is complete garbage. It's like one of the worst augments in the game, I think. They definitely over-nerfed it. I kind of talked about this in my patch preview earlier this week. I pretty much like do a patch rundown and go through all the changes and what I think about them every time a new patch comes out, which is typically every 2 weeks. And like, yeah, I looked at the Lee Sin changes. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is going to be horrible, but like, obviously, like the balance team, they're not purposely trying to like make bad changes. They're trying to make good changes, and like they can't always be right, you know. But like to me, this one seemed like pretty obvious. But I guess none of that really matters, because like it's just one hero augment. Just like pretend it doesn't exist. That's kind of like the good thing about hero augments. If one of them is god awful, it doesn't really affect you that much because you have 5 rerolls. So pretty much just don't click it, and yeah, go for other comps. You can still play this like general comp. Again, you just need like a free Sona 3 or like something like that. But don't play it with the Cleansing Safeguard stuff. Next build we have is Sureshots. Sureshots, like Samira isn't that good right now because she's being stolen by the Infiniteam players. So just don't do that. Like what you can do, the reason why you could play this comp is if you were going for the Shen build that we were talking about before, and then all of a sudden you are like, oh, I didn't get the Shen augment, but I have a bunch of attack speed items. So let me just play Samira. That's like the only time you would play this. But like here's like a generic build. We have like 4 defenders out here, and we have the Mech Garen. We have Samira with like the classic items, Last Whisper, healing item plus damage item. Ezreal's of course going to cap out your late game. And again, like Infiniteam players are going to take your Samira, so it's like very hard to 2-star her, and the reward isn't that much. But that's pretty much going to be it. Item priority this week is kind of the same. Tier's just very pivotal to a lot of comps. Not so much Infiniteam, but for like LeBlanc it's good, Lucian it's good, Kaisa it's good. And then like Anima, Misfortune, and Spellslinger are still very solid, even though there's a step below, because you have to remember, typically when you play TFT, you're going to be playing standard most of the time. So that revolves around the 4-cost carries. In the S tier, there's only one 4-cost carry, which is Samira in Infiniteam. But newsflash, Infiniteam doesn't even care that much about Samira. So all these like S tier comps, they're not really like 4-cost carry builds. But Anima Squad and Spellslinger and Jhin, those are like the strongest 4-cost carries right now, at least in the traditional sense. And because of that, like tier is going to be pretty good on them still. But yeah, oh yeah, one other note, I moved Gnar up to S tier instead of A tier as I was making this video. But if you guys have any questions, like just leave them down in the comments or join the Discord, discord.gg/BunnyMuffins. Because there are a lot of people that love talking about TFT there, and like most people are friendly and they just answer questions and stuff. It's also just like a fun way to kind of interact with other viewers if you guys are kind of into that. But yeah, if you are new, like I do these meta snapshots every single Friday, so I probably have like the longest running meta snapshot that's like run by a player at least. I think there's some like organizations that might have done it like since the very start of TFT, but in terms of like individual content creators, it's probably the longest standing one. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. It's all on the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta, and if you want to make like some content yourself, definitely head on over to teamfight.lol, because there are going to be a lot more features coming. Right now it's just the team builder. Next week, I don't want to make any promises, but next week we should have player profiles, so I'll probably do something fun with that, maybe like profile reviews if you guys are interested in that. So let me know if that would be a cool video idea or not. And then eventually we'll have data there, and then it's going to be hopefully much better than the other data sites, because I feel like there's a lot of like fluff on a lot of data sites. Like it's like going to the supermarket and you see 50 versions of tomato sauce, and that's just like too overwhelming sometimes, because you only just need one type of or one brand of tomato sauce, and you don't really need the 50 that are there in the supermarket aisle. And yeah, hopefully it simplifies things a lot more. But that's it for me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.